Hey, so I've been wanting to do this video for such a long time. One of my most asked questions over all my social media is, how do you read so much? How do you avoid book slumps? How can I read more? How can I pay attention to reading? So on and so forth. And I've had this idea in my brain for a little while, and finally, it is coming to fruition. I've decided to call this video Habits of a Lifelong Reader. We are currently at my craft desk, and I thought I could paint this little clay coaster that I made recently, and I can go through the habits. The first habit is to read different genres. I think it's really important to dabble in different genres and don't restrict yourself just to the one genre only. If you think about it in the terms of watching movies, you watch multiple genres of movies. You don't just stick to the one. Of course you have your favorite. Don't restrict yourself and only watch that one genre. It's the same with reading. Reading is such a valuable learning experience, and the act of being a reader, it pushes you out of your comfort zone. You learn so many new things, and the way to do that is to read different kinds of books. If you don't know where to start or what other genre you want to dabble in, I highly recommend setting yourself a little personal challenge. I do this every year with the Booker Prize. For the past year and a half, I've been challenging myself to read the entire Booker Prize shortlist and long list, same with the International Booker Prize. And this kind of forced me to read books that I never thought I would read. For example, historical fiction has never been my forte. I've never really read many. I think I've read like 2 or 3 historical fiction books in my life. But through reading the Booker Prize, historical fiction is now definitely a genre that I don't avoid. I think also by reading different genres, it really helps avoid book slumps, because certain genres I find are easier to read, like a romance book or a manga. I tend to gravitate towards after reading a really thick book, and I just need to turn off my brain. I think trying something new, no matter the hobby, is really important. And you can always DNF a book if you don't like it. You don't have to read a book and not enjoy it. If the genre is not for you truly and you've tried it out, then that's completely fair enough. But all I'm saying is give it a go, try it out. You might find a genre you love. My next piece of advice is something that I tell a lot of people actually, and that is to read multiple books at once, which I know sounds very daunting. I used to never be the kind of person that would read multiple books at once. I thought you were crazy if you did that. But I need you to hear me out, because it actually is really beneficial. When I say reading multiple books at once, I mean different formats. I tend to have an audiobook on the go, I have a physical book, I have a large classic that I'm reading, and I have a poetry collection that I'm reading. And these books are all different genres and all different kinds. This keeps things really interesting, and it really does help avoid that book slump. I especially love the audiobook format for non-fiction books, especially memoirs and autobiographies. I highly recommend reading any memoir or autobiography on audio form. 9 times out of 10, it is in the author's very own voice, and you can hear and feel the emotion just that much more. An example of this was I read Jeanette McCurdy's memoir, and it's called I'm Glad My Mum Died, and I read that through an audiobook, and it was incredible. To be honest, it had me crying whilst doing my washing, which is another point, to be honest. Doing housework, or even doing what I'm doing right now and having an audiobook to listen to, is so fun. You just kind of get lost in the world, and it also kind of reminds me of when you're little and you get bedtime stories before bed. It's just a really pleasurable experience. My next habit is really important, I would say, and it's something that I've only learnt recently, and that's to not focus on numbers to the point of feeling pressured, and I find it really detrimental. I've been logging my books on Goodreads since I think 2013 or 2014. And at the start, I didn't really care too much about the yearly reading goal, but since joining TikTok and posting wrap-ups and TBR videos, I noticed myself focusing so heavily on the numbers, on how many books I read that month, how many books I read that year. I felt like I wasn't a true reader because all these other people, they were reading so many more books than me. So I started to quickly read more and more books and try and catch up with everyone else, and I regret it, to be honest. I regret reading as much as I did. There was one year when I read over 100 books. Yep. And I don't think it was very beneficial for me because I don't really remember many of the books. I felt like I didn't delve deeper into what I was reading, and I feel like it's just a given that we shouldn't focus on the numbers. That is the last thing you need to focus on. How many books you read in a year is the least important thing. And this kind of leads me to my next point. It kind of works well, to be honest. My next habit is to engage more deeply with what you are reading. Reading a book is one thing, but understanding it and analyzing it is a completely different act. I feel like you are activating a different side of your brain when you are reading slower, deeper, and you are analyzing. There are a couple really good YouTube videos about how to read deeper and connect more with what you are reading. As human beings, we are constantly reading. We are reading subtitles, we are reading text to screen on TikTok, Minecraft videos. We are reading constantly Facebook posts, emails, but we are so used to the act of just stationary reading that we rarely read with intention. And this is something I've only learnt very recently after watching a few YouTube videos. I kind of seeked out a couple videos online to kind of question whether I was reading deep enough, because I felt like over the past few months I've not been engaging as deeply with my books as I want to. There's this creator called Odysseus, I think, and he's posted a few videos in the past about how to engage with your books deeper, and I highly recommend. The next habit is reading slowly. Because I read so much, my normal reading pace is quite quick, and that's not what I mean by reading slowly. I don't mean like you physically have to stop reading so many words so quickly. You have to read each individual word way slower to the point where you're bored. All I mean is you just need to read with more intention. It's so easy to read a sentence and just let your eyes glaze over and then go to the next. And then you think, wait, did I even actually read that sentence? And I guarantee half the times you don't, because I definitely don't. And then I have to remind myself, oh, stop, like you're reading way too quick. You need to slow it down, reread what you just read and actually pay attention. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense. Just read with more, maybe I shouldn't have said read slowly. Maybe I should call this read with intention. I feel like that would make more sense. My next habit is to convert your screen time to reading time. Use stationary time as reading time. I read a lot on public transport. You will be surprised with how many pages you can get done in a 30-minute train ride. I also think that not putting a lot of pressure on yourself to read and sit down for a certain amount of time. I tend to pick up my book even when I have a spare 10 minutes. Even when I have a spare 5 minutes, I will pick up my book and read a couple pages. I used to think that I would have to sit down and read for an hour, 2 hours straight, like a session, but you really don't need to do that. If you just pick up your book, read for 5 minutes, put it back down. When you go on your lunch break, for example, I only get a 15-minute lunch break, so I read for 10 of those 15 minutes, and each day those 10 minutes piles up, and before I know it, in my lunch break each week, I've read over 100+ pages. Instead of going on your phone, those stagnant moments where you're like, oh, I'm gonna go on my phone and just scroll, just replace it with picking up a book. A good way to combat the phone scrolling, doom scroll situation, what I actually did at the start when I was trying to wean myself off just the habit of going on your phone and doom scrolling, was I actually downloaded books on my phone. I downloaded a bunch of ebooks and I read them on my phone. And it really, really helped me kind of transition to reading instead of doom scrolling. And my last habit isn't really a habit, but it's more of an affirmation, more of a little bit of comfort, and that is to just let's stop being so hard on ourselves. Reading is an act of self-care. It is a way to connect with your past, your present, and the future. And I think it is such a spiritual experience to be able to read the words that someone has put so much effort into. It's so easy with any hobby to kind of get lost along the way, but with reading, it's such a self-soothing act for me. And I think it's so important to be kinder to yourself, especially when it comes to a bit of a reading lull, a bit of a book slump. The word book slump is so used these days, and I've used it plenty of times, and I've been in plenty of book slumps or lulls, and it is a part of life. I really hope that some of these tips are useful to you, and if you have any of your own kind of lifelong reader habits, I would love to hear them. Thank you for watching.